Today. All right, we're on. All right. We're going to keep going through demand stuff and review some stuff we've already seen, and but talk about some things that are sort of embedded in demand curves and how they apply to environmental issues or environmental valuation. So I'm going to basically dig back into a few things I've already talked about with some more granularity and lead us to what next week will be about sort of what's applied environmental economics, which is trying to make demand curves for environmental goods, but cover some stuff, some nuggets behind the demand analysis. So embedded in a demand curve are preferences. Each person, each consumer has preferences, and they're making choices. So in economics and in the math that we do, we're varying price and getting different quantities and saying that preferences are there and they're fixed and they're not actually changed. People know their preferences, they're clear about them, and they're basically just responding to prices to make choices about quantities. That's sort of the basic background of the starting point for economics. So buried in that, there's a whole lot, and I just want to like walk through some what that means that we're sort of leaving aside preferences because they're very important. And so more richer analysis are like, what if we dig into preferences? So just from a starting point, if you're learning economics, economics starts from a very hands-off approach, which I would say, just as a punchline, economists are libertarians. Economists think you're using your free will to make choices. This is very basic. I mean, there's lots of economists that aren't like this, but this is the starting point for the mathematical basis of economics. People aren't coercing you. People aren't making you make a choice. You don't have mental illness. You don't have bad choices. There's no addiction. There's no compulsive behavior. So you're freely, willingly making choices. And in a lot of sense, we could say individuals might make bad choices or have a compulsive behavior, but we look at the aggregate over society, and people in general make choices that are based on free will. This brings to some of the sort of definitions of economics. There's positive and normative economics. So we're basically within the field of what's positive economics, and we're within sort of what's the field of applied mathematical economics under positive economics. But looking at these two, historically, there was a field that's normative economics. And this is a question of what should be. What if we had the right solution, if we had a moral solution? And this would be looking more at questions about distribution, about equity, about inequality. Now, there's plenty of economists now that look at income inequality in a mathematical sense, look at the increasing income inequality in the United States and the world today. But we try to do that without values attached to it. Income inequality leads to different social outcomes, leads to different health outcomes, leads to different locations of where pollution is cited. That would be the field of environmental justice. But in general, the starting point from economics is to not make value judgments. The positive economics, this is the term of saying like we're just measuring what's there. We're just taking into account what choices we see. We see prices change, we see an effect, so we're going to try and measure cause and effect based on numbers of prices and shifts. We're going to use the scientific method to test our theories. So we'll take different sets of prices and arrange them in our data in a way that's going to allow us to make a test of human behavior. Usually not looking at distributional impacts, but what are impacts and inputs and outputs. So within that, there's an area of how one set of people's choices or one person's choices are going to affect other people's choices. And I just divided this into three basic areas that we can think about when we're going to move into environmental economics. The first is like, let everybody make their own free choice. Personal responsibility, free choice. Everybody has preferences, everybody makes free choice. If you want to change people's preferences, you could change their choices. But we're going to let people freely make all their different choices. A second area is where your choices are going to affect me. There's going to be an externality to your choice. There's going to be some market failure, and I started to talk about these. There's going to be something about your choice that's going to have some impact on me. It's going to cause me to consume something negative. So in environmental economics, that's where we're like, can we correct this price? Can we measure this externality and do something with economics to correct this price? Your choices are affecting me, and you're just responding to prices. Can I do something to correct that? And in the third layer is something we would call interference. Your choice is a wrong choice. It's a bad choice. And we have rules and laws all about these. We make it illegal. You can't make that choice. If you don't obey that law, we have a way to enforce that. We have fines. We have people following you around, observing you. So this is where you would rationally make a choice, but our society says that choice isn't a fair choice, or a choice where there's so much externality that's not worth it for society to receive it. So we'll talk through some of these, because we have market solutions for a whole bunch of things, but then we have a whole bunch of times where we just make things illegal. And here we have this question of like, as a society, our preferences are interdependent. Your choices and my choices are going to come together to make some sort of societal outcome. So each individual person's choices we're not considering separately. If we're making we're eliminating people's choices in certain areas. Another way that I want to motivate this is to talk a little bit about public health. People making choices that cause externalities. So we can talk about tobacco as an example, where there are social costs for individual decisions. And as a society, we say, you're causing us to bear the burden of your personal cost. This cost is really high to society. We want to change how much you're consuming. And we can do this through tax. We can do this through laws. We can do this through changing preferences. In environmental economics, there's a whole bunch of areas where we're going to say, power plant is polluting a certain amount of pollution. Over here, we have people are dying from a certain type of cancer. We have something that bridges those two that has to do with geography, that has to do with people's choices, what they're drinking, where they're living, what they're doing. So there's a whole bunch of people's choices relating to their behavior. But we have somewhere that we need a link between the two of them. So obesity, we already started to talk about this, but this is sort of a current problem that's going on, and our government is sort of scrambling to figure out, is there a government solution to this sort of obesity public health crisis? So the economist's starting point is people are responding to prices. People have sane preferences, and they're responding to prices. Somebody who's coming at it more behaviorally would say people have a desire to eat too much sugar and salt, and they're not making clear choices. But so we have things like a 64-ounce soda, a super big gulp, right? So that was made illegal in New York City a year or two ago, right? And so do we have a right as human beings to consume 64 ounces of high fructose corn syrup or not? So maybe just the price of drinking that soda is super low. It's like $2 for a super big gulp, and that's just crazy because we'll consume too much. I think I showed the picture last time of the bacon donut, right? There's just something wrong about consuming that. It probably tastes great, but it's probably like 59 cents at Dunkin' Donuts, and so like, is the price wrong there? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering how, like, I guess with like our obesity problem in this country, for example, like, we have so much food that's not really food, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like what economists look at that is like all of these corporations are making all this money off of this food-like product, like that's just so commonplace, it's so normal to eat, it makes up most of the majority of people die in this country.
right? That's what's offered. Like, so there's something about profit, something about driving like the cost of the ingredients down. So the cost of the high fructose corn syrup is driven down. And then there's something about this is the tricky part where it seems like they know how to dial in what you will just consume too much of, right? So they know that they know how like when you go into the movie theater and like you'll just be like, I have to have that thing, right? So that's the thing where should we have some intervention where like people have preferences they're not really in control of, that somebody can sell you like more calories than you need. But how do we do that? We don't really have a good way in our society to say people are making the wrong choices. That's what the corporations be like. People want this. People go in the store and they demand this. Right? So the question is, are food prices wrong? I'll tell you my anecdote was I was down on Telegraph Avenue recently at a doctor's appointment with my wife. It was taking too long. We were waiting. She's like, I'm dying hungry. I'm going to pass out. I can go get me some. So I run outside. I go down Telegraph. It's like Telegraph and 60th or something. And I go in like the liquor store there. And it's like, one of these stores. And I was like, looked around the whole store. And I was like, is there anything in the store that my wife would eat? It's like everything was like terrible food there. I found in the corner like some dusty like nuts or trail mix. But there's a store full of food that like I wouldn't actually consume most of it. And it's cheap. And for people that walk there, that there's like a Whole Foods like 10 more blocks away. But this is the store on the corner. So we have a whole bunch of stuff. There's like people's behavior. They like Coca-Cola. They like to go to fast food. And it's cheap for people who don't have a lot of money. But is there a way that we can adjust these prices? Do you guys know who Michael Pollan is? Please raise your hands. Almost everybody knows who Michael Pollan is. I was debating whether you guys would know. He's a professor in the journalism school. He's a longtime writer for the New York Times. He's sort of like one of America's leading intellectuals talking about good food and safe food. He has a quote. This is just from a couple days ago. And he was talking about income inequality. But the bullet line is, why is that crap so cheap? Our food is dishonestly priced. He was talking about people not getting paid enough that work in the whole chain, from picking food to working in food packing. But here's the quote: "Is decline of minimum wage dollars in the fast food industry, along with feedlot agriculture, pharmaceuticals on the farm, pesticides, regulatory forbearance. All these things are part of the answer to the question. Food is dishonestly priced, and the fact that people aren't paid a living wage to process it, serve it, or grow it, or slaughter it. So we have food that's, and this is, he's saying, it's below what a society would want to pay to even create our food. It's also making problems that the food is so cheap people are consuming too much of the wrong kinds of it. He's not an economist. He's a journalist, professor, but still a leading person in talking about food. So I showed this graph already too. This is the United States. We're up here at 30% of people are obese, which is kind of extreme. And then there's England and Canada closing in on us. Mexico is also up around 30%. So then we have some questions. So these countries are all moving up, even countries that you think of as healthier, they're moving up slower. So you have some question about prices. So could these companies down here change their pricing structure so that super big gulps don't get too cheap in their country? Or do these countries down here have different preferences, have different behaviors, have different ways that people relate to food? And that's like this cultural thing that's sort of outside of us thinking about prices. So tobacco. You guys are in an era where people don't really smoke. Probably when this building was built, the professor was up here smoking a cigarette in front of the class. You guys were all like smoking in between class. So what happened there, on the side of economics was the healthcare cost to pay for the disease burden of tobacco became obvious. It's something like 20 or 30% of deaths today are tobacco related. That's from much older people who smoked for a long time. But this is, calculated up in the billions of dollars that states and governments are paying for healthcare costs. So from buyer and seller, people choose to smoke. Consumers buy cigarettes, they're happy. Producers, grow tobacco, sell cigarettes, they're happy. There's an market trade exchange, everyone's happy. And it was a very long saga that it took to take this, there's a societal burden to smoking and that we're paying, and how do we, shift that so we can change people's behaviors? It took a very long time to where the taxes on tobacco got to where they are today. And a lot less people are smoking today. So here's a graph from France. It's just really indicative. So up here we have cigarettes per adult per day at the beginning of 1980, and then deaths from cancer, and the price was really cheap. So people were smoking a lot. It comes down as the price goes up. So this is just a nice graph for economists to show there's a lot of other things going on, but we're increasing the price of tobacco, people are smoking less, and deaths from tobacco are going down. That it's addictive. People aren't making clear choices, right? So there's other things going on here. If you need price alone to do it, and people are making a compulsive behavior, that's not enough. You have to add in other layers of convincing people. Yeah, definitely. It takes a long time. So this is also, this is like 45 years, right? So there's a big lag in there. You can't just jack the price of cigarettes and people will stop. It's their behavior. That's how they do it. That's what they do after a meal. There's cultural things embedded in there, and it's addictive. So is it just price effects? Certainly in cigarettes it wasn't. It took a long time. You had to change culture and you had to deal with people's addictions. And to help people, now there's technology to deal with addictions. There's patches, there's gum, there's a whole bunch of ways to help people deal with addictions. We drastically reduced where you could advertise cigarettes. It used to be every magazine had cigarette advertisements on, so that's reduced. You see less images of cigarettes. That's changing preferences over time. This semester, I think, they said you can't smoke at all at UC Berkeley, right? So that's a change. That's like, you can't smoke anywhere on campus now. Yeah, you can, apparently. So it hasn't been pushed back. So first it was restaurants, right? It was like you couldn't smoke in half of the restaurant. And then you couldn't smoke in any restaurant. And then now you can't smoke in any building. And then there's places where you can't smoke in an apartment building. Like I'm renting that apartment. Can't I smoke in the private space that I rent? And there's buildings that you can't. So there is legal, if your question is legally, you can prevent people from smoking in certain areas. I mean, UC Berkeley's interesting. Like it's a public place. It's like a public street, but they say it's our campus. It's owned by the Regents. You can't smoke on campus. I mean, they're going, so let's also say like they're going at this not through like the police are going to run after you, but like let's do a campaign where everyone knows that you're not, behavior matters. And behavior is creating sort of a crowd effect. If somebody sees me smoking, let's go at it through posters and billboards, not just through writing tickets. And that's this thing that's, somebody writing a ticket for smoking is like a price effect on doing a behavior. But we're trying to like combine that with a sort of peer effect. One thing that to me is really strange, just when cigarettes were almost disappeared from view, this came out, right? Have you guys seen these things? Vaporizers? Electronic cigarettes, which don't make any smoke. And apparently I've seen people smoking in restaurants, You know, and you're like, wow, you can smoke a cigarette in a restaurant, but then people will smoke these electronic cigarettes in a public place. So there's no smoke that comes out, but you still get the nicotine, so they're still happy, they still have their nicotine habit. So it's a gray area. So we have a whole bunch of rules about smoking a cigarette that we haven't figured out what to do about smokeless yet. So there's an interesting thing where, like, just when you thought that you weren't going to see any cigarettes anymore, like it just wouldn't be part of your view, there's this thing that, like, legally you can do in public. A little bit interesting. You know, technology will change and adapt. All right, so another one, seatbelts and helmets, right? So seatbelts didn't used to be required. Motorcycle helmets didn't used to be required. The public pays when people get in accidents. The public pays when you wipe out on your motorcycle and you go to the emergency room with severe head trauma, right? So they didn't say, you know, they didn't have a price incentive. Society said everyone is going to wear a motorcycle helmet. There's a little debate on this with bike helmets. Some people say bike helmets. I think bike helmets are required till you're like 16 or 18 or something like that. But bike helmets are not required, and that's an interesting economics behavioral thing. Some people say bike helmets should be required because it's just another place where society will have to stomach the cost. I'm a big bike rider. I think that bike helmets shouldn't be required because it could keep you from riding a bike. You know, sometimes you're like, oh, I don't have my helmet, I can't ride my bike. You should always choose to ride the bike. So I don't know, but some people say. They also have societies with more bike riding than ours, like the Netherlands, and they don't wear helmets, and their outcomes aren't worse than ours. So anyway, so if you're caught without a helmet or caught without a seatbelt, you're fined or taxed, so there is some price part to it, right? There is a financial thing. I'm going to put my seatbelt on in case so I don't want to get a ticket, right? But the laws here are interacted state by state. I think there's a couple laws. I go to Maine in the summer, and there's no helmet law. You see people driving around with no helmets. And interestingly, so this is way before your lifetime, but you know, these laws were coming in the 80s, and very few people were using seatbelts or helmets, and we're moving up over time into the 2000s. Now we're at 85 or 90%. Still, everybody doesn't use their seatbelt, but we're moving up. So there's a combination. There's a financial thing. There's a crowd behavior, and then once everybody does it, and then once you guys are raised all using seatbelts, you'll always use seatbelts. So there's some sort of cumulative group behavior that's not about pricing. Another big one is speed limits. This is, again, all before your lifetime, but when I was a little kid, the speed limit was 55 nationally everywhere in the country. It was originally done by President Carter because there was an Arab oil embargo and there was just a scarcity of gasoline. People were lining up for gasoline. And they said, drive 55. If everyone in the country does it, we'll save enough gasoline that there'll be enough gasoline for everyone. It was like, you know, let's have a group behavior where we will save gasoline. 1987, Ronald Reagan came in and he said, oh, the heck with that, Jimmy Carter, we're going to make it 65. And then the Republicans came in with Newt Gingrich, Contract for America. They said, we're going to abolish the national speed limits. Up to the states, they can do whatever they want. So I guess in Wyoming or in Utah, some parts of their highways, there's no speed limit. Supposedly, I haven't been on one of those roads. Generally not enforced. If you drive on I-80, you know, you're going to Tahoe or Sacramento or Davis, you know, you can be going 70 and you're like in the slow lane and everyone's flying past you. Like the ambient level on the highway can be 80 miles an hour easy. Well, the highest speed limits in California are 65 or 70. So times have changed. The amount of power you have in your car, the amount that your car's aerodynamic has changed, so the effect of the speed limit has changed. But I think this is sort of coming back, and I want to bring this back to our individual choices. So the faster you go, the worse gas mileage you get. So if you have a car and you go 70 miles an hour, that car gets 20 miles per gallon. If you go 85 miles an hour, which is a normal speed, or if you go 80 miles an hour, which, like, you know, that left lane is, you're getting 25% less miles per gallon. You're choosing to consume more gas the faster you go. Smaller cars, more like, you know, my car, something like this. But if I go 80, you know, it's an even steeper curve, and I'm giving up even more efficiency. So if I choose, coming back from skiing to go 80, I'm choosing to spend this much more gasoline to get home. Right? And this is a really interesting choice, I think, because people don't see this choice. It's not, I mean, some people have a car that's like actually showing them their miles per gallon now, but people make a lot of thinking about what kind of car with what kind of miles per gallon they choose. They think about the sticker of the car and what miles per gallon and what price point to get. But people don't think, like, every time that they're speeding or not speeding, how fast they're going is making this is potentially a lot more than the miles per gallon sticker on the car, right? This is a continuous decision that you're making all the time. When you buy the car, it's like one time buying the car. This is a continuous decision the whole way back from Tahoe. You're deciding how much gasoline. And so what I want to bring this back to is we have collective decisions to make about climate change and how much carbon we're using, how much carbon each of us is using at each moment, right? So we have big questions, you know, like the carbon footprint calculators, like, did you change your light bulbs to LED? Did you set your, you know, they're like bigger questions. But we have continuous choices that we make in our lives that are like, I'm going to decide how long it takes me to get to the mountains or not, right? That's going to have a big impact on how much carbon I personally as a consumer am choosing to consume. So it's interesting. One of the really big things here is will we be at what point do we have some elasticity? At what point, if we try to tax carbon, if we try to tax gasoline to change people's behavior, will it give people some incentive to change? On the role of miles per gallon, turn my phone on. On the role of miles per gallon, some people get super into it. There's these websites for hypermilers, and people figure out how to like exactly press the gas and how to go super slow. They can get badges. They can get like, you know, I'm the Baron of whatever that people do online. So there is sort of motivation of personal preferences. People have responded to figuring out how to be more efficient drivers. But for most of us, it's going to be this question about prices. If we have a carbon tax that's, you know, $50 a ton, we'll talk a lot about what the price of carbon could be. But if it came to be, you know, a tax on a gallon of gasoline, how much is that going to incentivize us? Would we ever say, like, I'm going to go to Lake Tahoe half an hour slower because it's going to cost me $10 less? Like, would we ever make a different decision? People definitely seem to be making the decision on which car to buy. You know, that we see that happening day to day. People are spending a lot of money on electric cars, but also people need to respond to sort of continuous feedback as well. All right, switching back to switching here to the math that we were doing the other day. Here's some of the questions. This is an example question going back to math and graphing. I'm going to switch completely from talking about gasoline. Okay, we have 3 roommates that live in an apartment together. Suppose